The twin moons hung low in the violet sky of Kiran 5, casting an eerie glow over the crystal plains. Nayla leaned against a jagged stone, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon as the wind caressed her silver skin. She cradled her swollen belly, her fingers lazily tracing the life growing inside her, a life that was forbidden by the High Council. "You're late, Dane," she whispered, her voice smooth like molten glass. A moment later, Dane emerged from the shadows, his muscular frame gleaming with sweat. "You always say that," he smirked, pulling her into his arms. "Because you are," Nayla teased, running her hands over his chest, nails grazing his skin. He kissed her, tasting the sweet alien essence on her lips. Nayla moaned softly as he pressed her back against the stone, his hands roaming over her body, lingering on the soft curve of her belly. "You know they'll come for you if they find out," Dane murmured, but Nayla silenced him with another kiss. "I don't care. Let them come," she breathed defiantly, arching her body into his touch. The moment deepened as Dane slid down her body, his lips trailing over her stomach. Nayla's breaths grew heavier, her body aching for him. But as his hand moved between her thighs, the sky above darkened unnaturally. A heavy wind rose, swirling dust around them. Dane froze, looking up. "What the hell is that?" Nayla's body tensed. "No, it's too soon," she whispered. From the swirling clouds, a figure descended, black wings spreading wide like a storm. His armor gleamed like obsidian, and in his hand, he carried a silver chain that pulsed with dark energy. The Death Angel, Avanar, had arrived. Dane stepped protectively in front of Nayla, but Avanar's cold, glowing eyes focused only on her. "Nayla of Kiran 5, his voice echoed, deep and emotionless. "Time's up. You've broken the law of creation. You carry an abomination." Nayla's eyes flashed with defiance. "This child is mine. You won't take him from me." Avanar's wings stirred the wind as he landed gracefully before her. "You know the punishment." Instead of fear, Nayla tilted her head and smirked. "Punish me then if you can." Her fingers trailed suggestively down her body, stopping just above her thighs. Avanar's gaze darkened. "You play with forces beyond your understanding, girl." Dane snarled, but before he could attack, Avanar raised his hand. Chains of dark light wrapped around Dane's wrists, throwing him backward and pinning him to the rock. "Touch him, and I'll destroy you," Nayla hissed, her own powers starting to flicker around her body. The Death Angel stepped closer, lowering the chain. "Naughty little alien," he murmured, his hand suddenly snapping the chain close to her neck, though not yet tightening it. "Perhaps you'll obey when you feel it for real." Nayla's eyes gleamed, challenging him. "Or maybe, you'll be the one begging." The tension crackled between them, electric, dangerous, charged with something neither of them would admit. Above them, thunder rolled as if the cosmos itself was watching. Avanar's hand tightened slightly on the glowing chain as he studied Nayla, his sharp eyes roaming over her form, her silver skin gleaming under the twin moons, her round, swollen belly pulsing faintly with forbidden life. "You think this is a game?" Avanar asked, his voice low, dangerous. Nayla smirked, tilting her chin, letting her long, shimmering hair spill over her shoulders. "Maybe it is," she purred, her fingers teasing the chain now resting against her collarbone. "But you don't seem like a man who minds games." Behind her, Dane struggled against his bonds, veins bulging in his arms as he tried to break free. "Leave her alone, you bastard." Avanar didn't even glance at him. "You defy the laws of the cosmos, Nayla. You were warned what would happen if you mated with a human. Now you carry a child that was never meant to exist, a threat to every world." "And yet here I stand," Nayla whispered, stepping closer to him, her eyes half-lidded, a dangerous glimmer in their depths. "And here you are, talking instead of acting." Avanar's jaw tightened. For a moment, his eyes flickered, something hungry, raw, buried deep beneath his icy exterior. "Do not tempt me," he growled, pulling the chain tighter so that it gently pressed against her throat. Instead of fear, Nayla let out a soft gasp, her body arching slightly into the pressure, her hands sliding down her hips in slow defiance. "Or what, Angel? Will you punish me?" she taunted, her voice like silk and sin. Avanar yanked her closer, their faces inches apart. His wings twitched, as if fighting some inner storm. "If you knew what I wanted to do to you," he hissed, before pulling himself back, shoving her away with a frustrated glare. Nayla only laughed, her belly glowing faintly as the child inside stirred from the rising tension. "So do it, Angel. You came all this way to chain me. What are you waiting for?" For a moment, neither of them spoke, the night air crackling between them. Finally, Avanar's voice dropped to a whisper, filled with dangerous promise. "If I put this chain fully on you, Nayla, there will be no turning back. Your body, your mind, all mine to command." Her lips curved into a wicked smile. "Maybe that's what I want," she whispered, stepping forward until her body pressed against his armored chest. "Maybe I want to see what a death angel does when he's forced to choose between duty and desire." Avanar's hand shot out, grabbing her chin, tilting her head up to meet his burning gaze. "You're playing with fire, girl. And fire burns." Nayla's tongue flicked out, running slowly over her lips as she stared up at him. "Good. Then burn me." The tension was thick enough to suffocate, swirling around them like a physical force. Behind them, Dane grunted as he fought his chains. "Nayla, stop," he shouted, desperation in his voice. "Don't let him." Avanar waved a hand, and Dane's mouth was silenced by a glowing band of light. "You've made your choice, girl," Avanar said finally, voice cold but eyes dark with something deeper. "But before this night is over, you'll wish you hadn't." With a flick of his wrist, he wrapped a second chain around her wrists, binding them behind her back. The glowing metal pulsed as it touched her skin, sending a strange heat through her body. "Consider this your final warning," he murmured, leaning in close enough that she could feel his breath against her ear. "The next time I chain you, you won't be able to stand." Nayla shivered, but whether from fear or anticipation, even she wasn't sure. The chains around Nayla's wrists pulsed with energy, sending waves of heat and tension through her body. Her silver skin shimmered in the moonlight as she glared at Avanar, refusing to bow her head. "You think these chains will hold me forever?" she whispered, her voice thick with both challenge and something darker. Avanar stepped closer, his black wings unfurled, casting a shadow over her. "They'll hold you as long as I command them to," he said, though his eyes lingered on her curves, watching the subtle rise and fall of her chest. From the side, Dane thrashed against his glowing bonds, fury burning in his eyes. "Leave her alone," he growled, though the gag around his mouth muffled his words. Avanar ignored him, focusing only on Nayla. "You think you can tempt me, girl. But do you even know what you carry inside you?" Nayla's eyes narrowed, but a flicker of something crossed her face. "I know my child is powerful. Stronger than any creature born of this universe," she said softly. Avanar leaned in, his lips brushing close to her ear. "Stronger? Nayla, that child inside you is death. A creature that will destroy worlds, tear apart dimensions if born." Her body stiffened, but she refused to show fear. "Maybe that's what this universe deserves," she whispered. Avanar's grip tightened on the chain, pulling her closer until her bound hands brushed against his chest. His body was burning hot through his armor, the tension between them thick as smoke. "You're willing to risk everything?" "Your life, his life," Avanar nodded toward Dane, "for a child that may doom us all?" Nayla's eyes gleamed. "You don't understand, he's special. A child of human and alien blood, a new creation. Meant to break the chains of your masters." Avanar's jaw clenched. "You speak of treason." She She smirked. Maybe. Or maybe I speak of freedom. A low growl rumbled from Avanar's throat. You think seducing me will save you? Nayla leaned in, her lips nearly grazing his. Maybe. Or maybe you want to be saved as much as I do. Her words hit their mark. For a heartbeat, Avanar's hand trembled, his wings twitching behind him. His eyes, dark as night, flickered with a dangerous heat. I should chain you by the neck for that, he growled, but there was a rasp to his voice now, a crack in his armor. Her soft laugh danced between them. Then do it, Angel. Show me how powerful you really are. With a snarl, Avanar yanked the glowing chain and, with a swift motion, looped it around her delicate neck. The heat of the chain burned against her skin, but Nayla arched into it, gasping softly, not from pain, but something more primal. Behind them, Dane's eyes widened in horror as he watched the scene unfold, powerless to stop it. Avanar leaned in, his face inches from hers, his breath hot against her lips. You don't know what you're asking for. Nayla's lips curved into a smile, her eyes half-lidded with defiance and dark pleasure. Oh, but I do. Suddenly, her belly glowed brighter, a deep pulse radiating from within. The ground beneath them trembled. Avanar froze, eyes narrowing. What is that? Nayla tilted her head, a wicked smile on her lips. The child, he's waking up. He knows you're here. The glow intensified, and from inside her, a voice, soft, yet ancient, whispered into the night. Release me or suffer. Avanar stumbled back, his wings flaring wide, as if bracing for an unseen force. This is worse than I thought, he muttered. Nayla tugged against the chain around her neck, her eyes gleaming. You're too late, Angel. My child has already chosen his path. Avanar's eyes burned with conflict, his grip on the chain tightening as if unsure whether to pull her close or end her now. Above them, lightning crackled across the sky, and a deep rumble shook the plains. The chain around Nayla's neck glowed hot against her skin, and she tilted her head back, letting it pull tight as she looked up at Avanar with dangerous, glimmering eyes. You're trembling, Angel, she whispered, her lips curving into a slow, wicked smile. Are you afraid of me or of what you feel? Avanar's wings twitched violently, his jaw locked tight, but his grip on the chain betrayed him, it wasn't steady anymore. You think this is a game, girl, he growled, stepping closer until their bodies nearly touched. You have no idea what I could do to you. Nayla smirked, running her tongue slowly across her lips, her silver skin glimmering in the moonlight. Then do it, she purred, her voice low and sultry. Show me. His eyes darkened, torn between duty and the fire she ignited in him. Behind them, Dane thrashed against his glowing bonds, his eyes wide with desperation. Nayla, stop it, he shouted, his voice muffled by the gag but filled with raw emotion. Don't let him. Avanar flicked his fingers, tightening Dane's binds, silencing him further, though his own gaze never left Nayla's. You've already doomed yourself, Nayla. This child will rip through you, and when he does. Nayla stepped closer, her body pressing fully against Avanar's armor, her breath hot against his throat. Then maybe you should enjoy me before I'm gone, she whispered, her fingers sliding up to trace the edge of his armor. Avanar's eyes closed for half a second as if fighting himself, but when they opened, they burned with something primal. You want to tempt death, he whispered, his voice husky, wrapping the chain tighter around her throat, making her gasp. Then death will answer. Her body arched into him, and she moaned softly, her eyes half-lidded. Maybe death isn't so frightening after all. Suddenly, her belly pulsed harder, glowing deep crimson, and a wave of energy rippled out, cracking the ground beneath them. Avanar stiffened. He's waking, he said, his voice suddenly sharp with warning. Your child isn't like you think, Nayla. He's not just a baby, he's something ancient. Something my kind has been hunting for centuries. Nayla's eyes flashed with fury and pride. Then let him come. Let them all see what we've made. The chain around her neck pulsed as if alive, and she leaned into Avenar's chest, her lips brushing against his ear. But you want me, don't you, Angel? Even if I'm forbidden. Avenar gritted his teeth. You're dangerous. And you like that, she whispered. In that moment, something broke in Avenar. He yanked the chain downward, forcing Nayla to her knees before him, his hand in her hair, gripping tight. You think you control this? He growled. Nayla looked up at him, her breathing ragged, but her smile never wavered. Maybe I do, she whispered, her tongue flicking out to graze his hand. Dane's eyes filled with panic, and with a sudden roar of effort, he broke free of his gag, panting as he glared at Avenar. Get your hands off her, he shouted. Avenar turned, startled by Dane's sudden defiance. But before either could move, the ground exploded in a pulse of red light. The child within Nayla had sent out a shockwave, fueled by his mother's arousal, anger, and defiance. The force slammed Avenar backward, his wings spreading wide to catch himself. Nayla's chains cracked and sparked, loosening for a brief moment. Nayla gasped, falling forward, but Dane was already at her side, catching her. Nayla, what are you doing? He whispered, cupping her face. She looked into his eyes, torn between love for Dane and the fire Avenar had stirred inside her. I'm fighting for us, she breathed, her hand resting on her glowing belly. For him. Avenar stood, wings flaring in rage and something darker, desire he could no longer hide. You've made a grave mistake, girl, he said darkly. Now, there's no turning back. Lightning cracked the sky, and the final chain around Nayla's neck glowed brighter than ever, pulling tight once more. Next time, Avenar growled, stepping closer, you'll beg for mercy. Nayla only smirked through ragged breaths. We'll see about that. Angel. The air crackled with tension, a crackling hum of raw energy radiating from Nayla's belly. The child within her stirred again, a ripple of power coursing through her body that sent waves through the ground beneath them. The chains that bound her rattled with electric force, pulsing like a living thing. Avenar stepped forward, his eyes darkened with both lust and fury, his wings spreading wide as he towered over her. The air between them hummed with unresolved desire, as though the very universe held its breath. You've made your choice, Avenar growled, his fingers twitching, his voice full of both warning and hunger. This child, he will be the end of you, Nayla. Nayla's lips parted, a wicked smile curling her silver lips. Maybe I don't mind the end, she whispered, her eyes locking onto his. Maybe I'm already past it. Behind her, Dane watched helplessly, rage and desperation clouding his gaze. Nayla, please, we don't have to do this, he pleaded, his voice hoarse as he struggled against the remnants of his restraints. We can leave, together. Nayla's heart twinged with a painful twist at the thought of Dane, the man who had fought so hard for her, who had loved her despite the dangers of her alien world. But now, it was no longer just about them. The child within her had become something far more powerful, something that demanded respect, worship, and even fear. Her gaze flicked to Avenar. You think you can stop me? You think you can control me? Avenar's eyes darkened, his wings folding tightly against his back. I don't need to control you, girl. I just need you to understand what you've unleashed. The energy around them intensified. The chain around Nayla's neck burned brighter, as though the child inside her was awakening, demanding its place in the cosmos. She could feel its hunger, its power, and it mirrored her own desire to break free from the chains that held her in place. I understand perfectly, Nayla said, her voice soft but filled with dangerous clarity. I've given birth to a power greater than anything you've ever known. He will shape this universe in his own image. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Avenar's eyes widened as the chain around her neck tightened, the light around it glowing blindingly bright. He stepped back, as if fearing the immense force of what was about to happen. Nayla turned to Dane, her eyes softening just a touch. I never wanted to hurt you, Dane. But this is our destiny now. Dane's eyes filled with pain as he reached out for her, his hand straining to touch her face. Nayla, you don't have to do this. We can run, we can escape this madness together. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the tug of her love for him, the warmth of their connection, the simple human love that had brought them together in the first place. But the power of her unborn child, the destiny she had chosen, surged within her. There was no turning back. Avenar's voice broke through the silence, low and furious. You fool. You will regret this choice. Nayla stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Dane's. Maybe. But I'm not the one who will regret it. She turned to Avenar, her expression hardening, her voice dark. You've had your chance. Now, you will bow to my power. With a flick of her wrist, the chains around her neck snapped, disintegrating in a burst of light, and her body shimmered with the force of her child's power. The red light that had once filled the air pulsed, sending shockwaves through the ground. The heavens trembled. Avenar's wings flared wide as the force of Nayla's power overwhelmed him. He fell to his knees, his body racked with the intense energy of the child. The world around them began to crumble, the stars dimmed as though acknowledging the birth of something far greater than them all. Nayla stood tall, her back straight, her hands glowing with the pulse of her child's energy. The power surged through her body, but her eyes were focused on Dane, filled with both sorrow and resolve. I'm sorry, but this is who I am now, she whispered, her voice carrying a bittersweet finality. As the ground beneath them cracked, the world fading into nothingness, she reached out for Dane one final time. Their hands touched, but it wasn't enough to stop the inevitable. The universe had changed. And with that, the last remnants of their world faded away, consumed by the power that had been born within Nayla. Her child, the harbinger of a new era, was now free.